the button turns red when it's recording.
And the timer goes and everything.
Yeah, and the timer and everything. And even the little monitors are going up and down.
Isn't that wild? Yeah.
What about that?
There you go. Well, welcome to the podcast. We're
Learn something new every day.
Learning which buttons to press.
And which ones not to.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. And the weather has dramatically changed slightly. Temperatures dropped.
Unbelievable.
Yep. But it's crazy to see with all this rain we've had the past couple of days and all that's going on.
Yeah. I know I said this in the staff meeting, but it is unbelievable the power of water.
Yeah.
Like think about large sections of an interstate just completely gone.
Just gone. Yeah.
And
It's crazy.
and think about how long it's going to take to get that repaired so it would be even passable.
Yeah. I mean, interstates don't grow overnight.
Yeah, no. And to stabilize all of that and get in there and do all that. Because I remember years ago when going through North Carolina, as soon as you cross state line, you go through those two tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those tunnels got knocked out or something.
Oh, yeah.
And so you had to drive around the mountain. So they made a little passable road. But just how much of a hassle that was. I think we were living in Raleigh at the time maybe or something. But just how much of a hassle that was.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got miles of sections of highway that's gone.
Yeah.
People are trapped. They're having to, like you said, fly in supplies.
Yeah.
And you don't think about like people who have babies, man, that need water, that need formula, that need diapers, that need like all the necessities. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of people out there in need right now.
Yeah. From rain. And what you said, that you don't think water can have that much of effect, but literally it's that much rain.
Just water.
That, it looks like an earthquake went through there.
Yeah.
Like just roads destroyed, mudslides. Like it's just, man.
Well, I know in Newport, Tennessee, the dam, it didn't break or anything. It just went over, just crushed over top of it. So all that water is what took out part of I-40 on into the town of Newport. I mean, you just imagine, dude.
Yeah.
Not a thing you can do about it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's kind of like when they had the floods here in 2010, and our kids were at DCA at the time, and it flooded DCA, the Stones River, which is, it has to come a long way,
Right.
And their headmaster at the time told me that because they had to let water out of the dam where it was going to do that, and so they warned them. They called them ahead of time and said, "Look, this is coming. Not a thing we can do about it." And he said he just sat there and watched it just creep up, just like a monster, and then went to the football field, parking lot, and then it just came into the building. There's not a thing you can do about it.
Yep.
That's crazy.
It is wild.
Yeah. I think there were some protocol errors that definitely didn't lend itself to a positive outcome, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Like how do you manage that? Like, how do you manage water when you just get so much of that at one time like that?
Right.
I think anytime we have disastrous things kind of hit over the weekend, there's difficulty assimilating teams and coordinating efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. There was we used to go on a mission trip every year to Hendersonville, North Carolina, which is just outside of Asheville, and just seeing some of the people that we met there and created relationships with, seeing things that they've posted, because really we're in the middle of Hendersonville is a lower income area. So even some of the people that we would go do ministry with or minister to, it was trailer parks, and some of the roads were already washed out at the time. So now dealing with this, like when you get that amount of water coming through, if it's picking up houses and floating, and houses are floating away, like trailers don't exist anymore.
No.
So last I saw, there was over 1,000 people still missing, and
think about this.
Scary.
And I don't know the science behind all this, but when water comes in like that, it just contaminates everything. And they even say like you see those, like these floods come in and like people out there playing in the water and stuff. And they just say, no, it's just nasty. And I guess it's just all that it comes through or whatever, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's bad. Not a playground for sure.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of, we've got people in our church that are connected. Ethan Niesick is with a church in Johnson City, and they've got some disaster relief things going on. I've got a buddy that's at a church in Asheville that I haven't heard specifics on the damage that they've got, but they've got some ways that we can support. So we've already had some people reach out and ask how we can help. they'd be great people to get in touch with. So if you reach out to us, we can get you in touch with them and make sure we can help in any way we
Yeah,
can.
and that's what we're going to do as a church is we'll partner with some of these places that are closer to the need areas, and we'll just funnel our help through them.
Yeah, for sure.
Easiest way for us to do that.
Crazy stuff. And then they say something else is brewing that may be coming in this weekend too. So definitely be praying for those who have been affected.
Yep.
Praying for that potentially coming to and preparing.
Absolutely.
For that. So, anyways,
So on a lighter note,
yeah,
I was in Knoxville this weekend because took Julie up there to help her mom and dad.
Yeah.
And came back, and so Julie actually got Patty something.
Oh, okay.
But there's a little caveat I've got to give to it.
Nice.
Okay. So let me.
Intrigued. We still need our drum roll.
I know, man.
Button.
Let me
I need
see
a drum
if I
roll.
got it. Okay.
I'll give you a drum
So
roll.
it is a box of zingers.
A box of
Nice.
zingers.
Yeah, but here's the problem though. So this is awesome. So Julie said, "All right, be sure and take this back, give it to Patty during the podcast." You know, because yada yada. Okay, that's great. We'll do it. So I'm driving home, and this box of zingers is over there in the passenger side. And look, dude. So I started eating them.
Self-control.
Wow.
Yeah, so I ate a couple. I didn't eat many, but so
These
So
are for
there you
Patty.
have it, Julie.
So
Patty'd
the box
be
is
willing to share with you.
Yeah,
for
the
sure.
box is opened, and here's what I told Julie. I said, "Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to give her the whole box. I'm just going to when she says a zinger, I'm just going to throw a zinger at her, just toss a zinger across the way, just literally. Yep, that was a zinger.
Just make sure it's unwrapped so I can catch it properly.
Yeah, 100%.
exactly.
So, and they're actually iced vanilla, which I can attest to this. They're really good. Yeah,
I have no doubt.
had one last night. They're really good.
Can
Yeah.
confirm.
Yeah,
Quality
So-
assurance.
Thanks. You know what would have been?
So,
you know what would have been even better?
What's that?
Like a whole box.
Oh, well, yeah, but here's the deal. I know, true. But it's 10 individually wrapped zingers in the box. You get 8. I mean, you get 8.
So you ate too.
I ate 2. I had one coming home, and I had one last night.
More than half. That's what
Yeah.
Nice.
Put 'em
Thanks,
in your
Julie.
office. But you got to understand this, though. When I'm batching it, when Julie's not there and I'm batching it, a zinger and a couple of cheese cubes, that was my dinner last night. You know what I mean? So it's not. I mean, you got to understand. You contributed to
Cheese
my
cubes.
well-being, my
Yeah.
welfare.
I'm glad I
last
could
night.
help.
Well, you did.
forcefully.
Unknowingly,
You had
but
no
yes.
you had no choice. But
Yeah. So there you go. Make sure the zingers can be seen on the podcast.
Those
That's
zingers.
amazing.
That's awesome. Now every time you
It's
talk
exciting.
today, you're gonna see zingers. in
See,
front
that's
of you.
Julie though. I would have never thought
so
to do that.
good.
I honestly did not know that was a thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, zingers are awesome.
Yeah.
My favorite is the orange. They have an orange cream with vanilla icing. No orange cake or something. It's so
That sounds
good.
yummy.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
But
Yeah.
these are great.
those are good.
My dad was always more of a the little Swiss cake rolls.
Oh yeah,
Chocolate.
yeah.
those are good. I like the
That's good
ho-hos, the round ones.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember Suzy Q's?
Suzy Q's.
Dude.
That's
Oh,
I can't remember if that's my
Yeah.
dad or mom. What's one of their favorites?
Suzy Q's were awesome.
You know, I got my only paddling in grade school because of a Swiss roll cake.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
no,
bad,
we
right?
I
have to
think
hear
that's the
this
little
story.
Debbie name for them though.
A Swiss roll?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds right.
It
yeah.
is.
Yeah, but Host just came out with
Yeah.
those first.
Really?
Oh, okay.
They're 10 times better.
Oh,
Yeah, 10 times better.
what was their name?
I don't know.
Something better.
Yeah,
Something way better.
You know what?
While I was looking that up, I want to hear the story.
All right. So, just a disclaimer: I am not proud of the action that I took on behalf of the Swiss roll cake.
So you
Just
cannot
putting it out there. And I was in third
deny
grade.
or confirm.
That's correct. I
Okay.
was in third grade and I did not know Jesus. So let's put it out there.
BC.
And I grew up with brothers and all boy cousins. So you just get the picture. Long story short,
So what's your declaration on how you acted this weekend at the hospital?
yeah, we're not talking about that.
Moving on.
We're talking about a
sorry.
Swiss roll cake.
We're talking about, sorry. Move on.
Okay, so
Moving ahead.
anyways, my parents were young, raising 3 kids, and so money was tight.
Mm-hmm.
So we pretty much always had like a school lunch. And I always envied those kids who had like the hand-packed lunches
Yeah.
and the really cool things. And there was this girl that sat across from me every day in the cafeteria. She had red, like curly hair and pigtails, cute as a button, but she always had a Swiss roll cake. And I think she saw me drooling,
Yeah.
like watching the Swiss roll cake, because she would unravel it like layer by layer.
Like looking at
Making
you.
eye contact with
like
you.
looking at Yeah, nice.
And so
That's
I'm like,
awesome. What a nice kid.
there was obviously a special moment. I don't even know what happened, but my mom packed me a lunch one day. And so I felt like the big stuff with a lunchbox.
Yeah.
Probably my brother's,
Yeah.
Fall Guy lunchbox or something.
Nice.
But anyways, I had a lunch. And so I opened it up, and what was in there?
A Swiss roll cake? How did your mom know?
She knew I always talked about him.
Oh, okay.
This girl, Kathy, she has one every day, Mom. You should see
She
it.
unrolls
It's
them in front of me.
amazing. And so, long story
Nice.
short, I get through the rest of the lunch, and I open up my Swiss roll. And guess what the heifer across from me did? She grabbed my Swiss roll cake and ate it. She already had some.
She grabbed yours and ate them?
She sure did. So as her
Yikes.
hand
You're
came
not kidding.
across to grab the Swiss roll, my hand might have connected with her face.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, you don't.
No
Again,
doubt.
lost third grader,
Third grader.
Yeah,
heartbroken over a Swiss roll cake.
man.
And so, bless them, the cafeteria monitor came over. She saw the whole thing and felt like really bad because she knew.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
That
She's
seems
just like, you know what I
justified.
got to do? I'm like, I do.
Mm.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
She took my cake.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, it seems justified
not-
to
yeah.
me. So, moral of the story: don't take any zingers today, and
No.
you'll be all right.
So I'm sorry I ate 2 of your zingers. Wow. So now I know we're getting that now. I didn't realize she was that protective over
I didn't either.
pastry cakes.
I
was a
really didn't either
subject.
until that happened again.
You know what's
child.
funny is I give her a box of 8 of 10 zingers and she tells that story. Like,
The first story that came to mind.
get a little closer.
No connection.
Pow.
Don't think too far
pow.
into it.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That is awesome.
Only paddling. It was worth it though.
We had a.
She never touched my food again.
Did you get the zinger back? I mean,
No, she ate it.
Oh, dude. It was in her mouth.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So did you punch her before or after you?
As soon as she grabbed the Swiss roll, there was an exchange.
So you punched her before she ate your cake?
Yes.
And she still ate it?
Yes.
Mm.
That's what I was trying to get to. Like,
That's pretty
did it
bold, dude.
knock her back enough?
Yeah.
Man, that's maybe an
I
addiction.
probably would have picked it up off
There's
the
a problem.
floor.
There's a problem there. Codependency or something.
Oh, sick.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast.
That's awesome.
We don't condone fighting, but sometimes
It's in one of the commandments somewhere. We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
at some point. Not today, though.
Not today, though.
Not worried
But-
about it.
no, we'll get to
Not
it.
proud,
Hang
but
on.
it is factual.
BC.
That's got to
Yeah.
be a thou shalt
BC.
not somewhere.
Yes.
Like somewhere in Exodus, it says that.
Absolutely. Well, this week we talked about the importance of the name. So, third commandment: "Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain." So, yeah, kind of going through this, I think a lot of times, when we simplify the commandments, we talked about this last week too. We talked about one God and then no idols, which we saw that's kind of the case, but not fully the case with the second one. And third one, a lot of times it's the Lord's name in vain, but a lot of times we say don't cuss, like when we just make it
That's right.
simple.
Yep.
Which isn't necessarily the specific context, but do you think this commandment still applies to cussing or using curse
Yeah.
words? Is it still kind of under this umbrella, or is that a different context?
You know, it's really interesting because I think, and in the sermon last week I did some research in what they call it the Jewish Virtual Library, which is a great resource if you want to go and understand the Old Testament and how they viewed the Old Testament and how they revered it and they took it. So in what we would call a Gentile culture, which we would be, not having that background, I don't think that like my first point under point number 2, what's in the commandment I talked about when we invoke the name of God in a careless or worthless manner, right? So we would utilize that in maybe saying a 2-word phrase, God's name on the beginning of it, or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, that was never even an issue for the Jew
Right.
because, I mean, they were afraid to write down the name. You know, so their culture and their view of the name of God, saying God's name in a way that was attached to a curse word, wouldn't even have been considered.
Right.
You know, so I think to the Jew, it was much more about taking false oaths. But to us, I think in a Gentile world, I think it definitely has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
You know, because again, you can get into the etymology of words and say that, well, this word is just a word. This word is just a word. You know, everybody does that. You know, as people have first tier curse words, second tier curse, all that kind of stuff, whatever. And they are just words, but it's the intent behind the word, right? And to me, it's most of what we do in language are cultural expressions. And so when I say something, just like Cody was telling me about words that students are saying these days, and my friends at Starbucks and Kroger, are always saying a word to me like "that's fire" or "no cap" or whatever that means.
Zinger.
Zinger or skibbity or whatever. It's so funny. I said skibbity one time, and Cody said, "Don't ever say that again." And so I think it's just cultural expressions, right? Because to me, those are just silly words.
Yeah.
Well, to a teenage culture, they may have a word that means like something horrible, graphic, or whatever. I don't know that.
Yeah.
And I'm saying a word, and everybody's like, "Yeah, you don't need to be saying that word."
Yeah.
So intent is so much behind our language and our phrases and our words, and I think that's a huge part of this commandment for us. I'm not saying that Jews didn't in modern day don't take the Lord's name in vain. Obviously, it's changed a ton, from Orthodox, and probably in Orthodox world it's a little different. But I do think it has a lot to do with how we, because really how we view a name has to do with how we feel about what that name represents. And so that's where I got into that point of relationship, that it's so important for us to, when you invoke the name of God, when you just take the most common 2-word phrase that we think of when we think of taking the Lord's name in vain, you're actually calling down the power and authority of the Almighty God to condemn something to hell. When you say that, and so we don't think about it that way, but that's exactly what you're doing, and I was listening to a guy speak on this, and he felt very free to say that 2-word phrase in his explanation to his congregation.
Yeah.
But it was more of a West Coast thing, and I'm like, man, I can't even put those 2 words together. It just freaks you out because, and again, his intent was, here's what we're doing. We're invoking God to do this to someone. And he's right, because he wasn't using God's name in a way that was careless or worthless. He was teaching. But most of the time we hear that, it's in that context. It's very worthless. It's not even thought of.
Yep.
And someone could say, well, when somebody uses that phrase, they're not even thinking about that. Right. Well, that's the problem. It's a worthless way to invoke the name of God.
Yeah.
You just don't throw the name of God around like that.
Right.
And a lot in our culture, I think, has shifted and changed because, again, when did God become the big guy in the sky? When did God become these phrases that we use that, seem maybe or might seem a little more relational, but when does that cross the line and become, really a violation of that commandment?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Great question. So when does that cross the line and become?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of those, the big guy in the sky or
big guy or
even some people go the daddy God route.
Yeah.
I remember going to Centric Camp one time, and the guest pastor there always started the prayer with, "Hey God."
Yeah.
And it really rubbed me the wrong way the first few times I heard it. But obviously after I spent time listening to him and hearing his testimony and knowing that was just the way that he saw the Lord.
Yeah.
As a real father figure to him, he approached it differently, but it really caught me off guard. Hey God.
Yeah.
Instead of, a traditional way of opening a prayer.
Yeah.
Well, think about this. Jesus, when the disciples asked Jesus, I don't know where I read this or heard this the other day, but I thought, man, this is a great thought. So if Jesus were to walk in our podcast room right now, and he looked at us and said, "You got one question. Ask me. You can ask me one thing." What would we ask him? Now, here's where I'm going with that. Not that we need to answer that, but the disciples said, "Teach us to pray." Like, think about that. Like, they could have asked Jesus to teach them to do anything, and they said, "Teach us to pray." Because they had seen him pray in such a different way than they were used to praying in their more orthodox way.
Yeah.
It was relational and it was different. And here's how Jesus started the prayer. Think about how he started the prayer. "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." So even when Jesus was teaching the disciples how to pray, He said, here's the first thing you do. You got to know who you're approaching.
Wow.
And you've got to have a level of respect for that authority. Hallowed be thy name. That's how you start. Like, you don't go, and you know, so I'm not crashing anybody that's going to, you know, use a different word, but, you know, to me, it's not, hey, Daddy, what's up? Or what? It's our Father who art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name.
Yeah.
You know, there was still this reverence that Jesus had for the name of God. And he, when he was teaching those guys to pray, he's like, if you can't start here, man, you're not gonna, you're just not gonna get it.
Yeah.
Now, I'll give you a perfect example of this. I didn't want to say this in the sermon because it's, you know, it's personal to me, but my father-in-law was watching it with Julie, and so you know, I didn't want to say this in a context that he would listen to, because he's not a podcast listener. I wouldn't mind him hearing this, but so Julie and I have been married for 38 years. So I've known Mr. Lay for over 38 years. Never, ever once called him by his first name. Never. And I never will.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, everybody else around me, you know, all the other brother-in-laws and nephews and whatever, you know, they all call him by his first name. Never called him by his first name. And a lot of that for me is the level of respect I have for him. You know, I just don't feel like that I'm in a position to say, hey, Fred, what's up? You know, or, hey, I mean, it's just not, I mean, he's Mr. Lay.
Right.
You know, and I've done the same thing with her mom. You know, and my kids have seen that. My kids have even asked me, like, why do you call him that when nobody else does?
Yeah.
You know, and just for me, there's just always been a level of respect that I've had for him, still do, that he's just, and sometimes it's a little awkward. It's not awkward for me, but it's like when I'm asking about his wife, you know, hey, how's Mrs. Lay doing today?
Yeah.
You know, instead of, you know, or most time I just say, how's grandmother doing? You know, because that's how the kids respond to her, you know. So I think for me, and again, it's so neat how, like, I guess you get to my age and you've kind of walked through these relationships and you've seen God show you things in relationships that really reflect who he is and how he wants you to think of something.
Yeah.
Right. So like in that relationship for me, you know, there's been such a modeling of a respectable, godly life that, like, it's easy for me to have that level of respect for him.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not, he's not, and I know he loves me and I love him. Like, I know where our relationship is, but at the same time, like, I mean, I'll probably at his funeral referring to him as Mr. Lay. That's just, you know, that's just how that is. So I think for this, you know, Jesus started off that prayer and said, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." It's not that it defines a standoffish relationship at all, but I think it defines a recognition of, you know, authority and respect, and, man, just something that, and I think that's how he wanted the disciples to see God, even though he was there and he said, "If you've seen me, you've seen the Father." You know, you're my friends now. You know, those types of things. Jesus used that language, but that still didn't diminish the authority and respect we should have for God's name.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge. So then getting into, and you mentioned it some in the message, but what about the, you know, like replacement words or the starter words of, you know, when, you know, Gomer Pyle, golly, or, you know, saying G's short for Jesus, or any of that, gosh, as a replacement. What do you think about those that we can use as replacement? Sometimes maybe replacements for curse words, or replacements that may start the name of Jesus, or whatever that might be.
You know, it's you know, people will say, "Gosh darn."
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's not, you know, it's what's the intent? You know what I mean? I mentioned this in one of the services. I used to play golf with a guy. I was his youth pastor in seminary. Great guy. He's been here a couple of times, and he doesn't do this as much anymore. But, man, when that dude would play golf, he had the best Christian cussing vocabulary I've ever heard in my life. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And he was like he'd hit a shot and he would just start, you know, like Yosemite Sam does. Frickin', reckon. I mean, he would have like words, like real words.
Yeah.
And it's like he's cussing somebody out.
Yeah.
He's not using the words, you know? And I would say, bro, just use the words, man. I mean, the Lord knows the intent of your heart. The Lord knows what you're doing. You're not getting by with it because you're making up words. You know, you're making up Yosemite Sam words. But man, he'd throw clubs. It was crazy. But again, I think there's that in the intent of the heart, you know, because that's an anger issue. Like that's a, and again, he's not this way anymore. He does so much better. But and golf will do that to you sometimes.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
But it's man, like that's a deeper issue, you know.
That's
now
a sour fruit of the spirit.
Yeah,
No
100%.
self-control. Yeah.
You know, but then you've got people like you said, and for some reason we seem to have to verbalize these things. You know, as I use as an illustration in the message, why is it that you hit your finger with a hammer and you invoke the name of God? Invoke the name of your cousin.
Yeah.
You know, oh Johnny. Oh, Cameron. Oh, you know, maybe I'll start doing that when I get frustrated or mad. Oh, Cameron.
Don't you take my name in vain?
Yeah, exactly.
You should just say this.
Zinger.
Yeah, zinger.
Oh, zinger. I should have eaten those 2 zingers.
My favorite thing, I don't know where they picked it up, but the boys every now and then say, "Oh my gosh."
Oh yeah.
And so we're trying to like, even though again, it's, you know, it's not, but then there's this conversation. And so we try to divert it to, "Oh my goodness." And so Hannon has started saying, "Oh my chicken nugget."
No, nice.
And then
that's awesome.
We laugh at them, say, "Oh my French fry." Oh my, they go, but
because they do that. Why does a child go right to, "Oh my gosh"?
Yep.
I mean, it's crazy. People don't believe in depravity. Depravity is real, right? And there's an evil force around us that wants us to violate and defame and deface the name of God.
Yeah.
And so it's just the natural thing that comes out of us, which is so crazy. Like we had to understand that. So yeah, I mean, I think we got to be careful of it. You got to be, and it's interesting how anytime that's said around me, like it's always funny when I go to golf tournaments or whatever, and these guys will be cussing and swearing, and I'm like, man, well, you know, I don't get uptight about that. I understand. I don't know where they are with the Lord or where they're not. So you know, no judgment there. But as soon as they found out, like I'm a preacher, it's like, oh man, I'm sorry, dude. I shouldn't have been saying that, you know. And it's like, no, man, you're good. You know, you don't answer to me, you answer to God, so we're good.
Yeah.
But anytime I hear somebody take the Lord's name in vain, it should just run right through us.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You know.
So we talk about just talking about the reverence of the name that in this culture, the Jewish culture, like you mentioned, I've heard this before, like with the name Yahweh, they wouldn't even write the vowels in that because they had so much respect for the name of Jesus. They just write YH, is it WH or VH?
Yeah.
Why do you think? I was trying to think how to ask it. Why do you think we've lost that respect over the years? Obviously, we just sometimes I mean, in this like in our culture, just throws out the name. You even mentioned if they write the name, if they throw it away, what there was a pretty harsh punishment for that?
Yeah. When you know on the first page, I should have put this quote up on the screen, and I thought about it too late. But as I was getting into the Jewish virtual library on this topic, you know, a big disclaimer popped up on the screen, and basically said, if you print out in any form the name of God, treat it carefully and with respect. Like, you know, because they had to go through this and reading this through their rabbinical traditions, they had to decide once the computers kind of came on board, man, if you type the name of God and then backspace over it, did you just deface or defame the name of God?
Wow.
Like it was that serious for them.
Yeah.
And they decided that it wasn't because it wasn't in print, but once it was printed out, okay, now you've got something that you cannot throw it away.
Yeah.
Like you cannot write the name of God, type the name of God, print it, and then destroy that, because if you do that, you're defaming the name of God.
Wow.
So it's really an issue or a question of, you know, some kind of reverence. You know, like where did we lose that?
Right.
And for me, and I don't know, this is probably anecdotal, but for me, I always think about and go back to what I've seen and read about the Jesus movement. So think about this in the context of churches up to that point in the 40s, 50s, which they were very reverent, very staunch, very quiet, very, you know, you came in, sat down, you didn't say anything, and everybody dressed up on Sundays, and there was a reverent feel for where you were and what you were doing. And then the Jesus movement comes through and completely changed a lot of that, right, culturally.
Yeah.
And so in that, I've read that, you know, God began they began to refer to God and refer to Jesus in a very relational way with very relational terms. Yeah. And the daddy concept and the papa concept, like all of those things that relationally for them they were looking for. And I think it's just carried over, and I think there's always been that tension between, even in our church now, somebody will come in with, dressed nicely. They could have, Peter Millar shorts, a $200 shirt and some dingmas on their feet, and people are like, man, look at that person dressed sloppy over there. They need to be dressed up when they come to church, and you're like, oh, they're they got about $1,000 kicking on the, so I'm not sure they'd say that, but that's not the point. The point was like, this is how you did it, because the way we dressed had something to do with how we view God and how we revere God. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think some of that to an extent is still valid. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we should teach. I mean, Jesus even did. You can't say, well, Jesus come in and change that. We talk about, how did Jesus fulfill the law? How did he fulfill this law? Mm-hmm. Well, even in him becoming the very relational piece of the puzzle for us when it comes to God, because he is the image of the invisible God. So God wanted us to know him even more deeply and more intimately, and so he came to us in human form. So, and then he created this relationship with his disciples. But then when he taught them how to pray, you always got to go back to that. When he taught them how to pray, he said, guys, you start with reverencing the name. So I think there's a balance in there, man. And I think that's with anything that we look at, especially in these commandments, is there's a balance in that to where that we can't get so flippant and sloppy about how we view God and how we view Jesus. Yeah. But at the same time, it's not about baseball caps and polo shirts versus button-down shirts and ties. It's not about any of that. But at the same time, I think we do. It's interesting how in the 40s and 50s and 60s, early 60s, people wore their best to church. Yeah, and that was just a way of them recognizing this is a special place. Yeah. Well, that was also a very agricultural society that wore overalls and work clothes all through the week. They never dressed formally. Now we have people who dress that way every single day when they go to work. And so it's not as much of a cultural identity or cultural piece than it was then. So, and I've never gotten hung up on that. I think we all need to. I think we could come in and we can, sometimes disregard our view of reverence based on something. But I've never really had to address that much. Yeah. Because I think we just have to be careful. We have to revere the name of God in what we're doing and in the environment we're doing it in, and not just take it flippantly. I think that's the thing. And I think in all of our services, we take very seriously what's happening. I had a doctor's appointment early this morning, and I was talking to the lady that was checking me out, and she said, hey, man, we're actually circling back around, and we're going to be coming back to Emmanuel. I said, man, that's awesome. And she was talking about her daughter who wants to come back to Emmanuel. And this is why she said she wanted to come back to Emmanuel, because when they start playing worship music, they don't turn all the lights down and it doesn't get loud and scary. And I thought, that's cool. We don't think about environments that much and how that helps. But, we're not the pitch dark laser beam, all that kind of stuff, right? Because that's not what we're about. Right. But at the same time, like yesterday's worship, I thought was very matched very well this concept. It was a very reverent feel to every song that we did. And so I thought that supported that well. Yeah. You mentioned the balance there, and that was kind of getting into the next question I was about to ask, is how do we balance that? Because and I don't necessarily think it's one way or the other. On one hand, I think you can go too far on making it too much about reverence and how we dress, and dressing is to the best of our ability, and you have to come into the sanctuary or the church, whatever. On the flip side, I think we can get too flippant on, well, I'll just do whatever I want. I'll wear whatever I want and have absolutely no reverence. I remember back in college, there were, we have people in our church. There's plenty of people that see the sanctuary in itself as such a reverent place that should have reverence, and we should have respect around it. I was thinking back to college.
that there were some church plants and churches around Liberty that met. There was one in particular, non-denominational church plant that met in a club.
Yeah.
They rented on Sunday morning. They rented the space from an existing club, and that was a big source of talk in the town, especially in a Christian Christian college town. Of like, well, this is happening on Saturday night, and then you turn around and worship on Sunday morning. Where's the reverence there? So for us, the way we dress, we've had conversations. Like I'm sitting here right now on a work day with shorts and a hat on. There's probably people that don't like that or would not do that. Bringing coffee or food into the sanctuary.
Right.
There's a lot of things that we can, a lot of ways we go with this. How do we really find this balance of God is worthy of our respect, our honor, our reverence? It's the way that we should start our prayer. We need to hold his name highly. How do we balance that with the flip side of there could be people who don't have those nice clothes that we want to welcome them in church as well, or even just the maybe taking the just the traditionalist for the sake of tradition side out of it to where like yes, God deserves our respect, but I don't have to wear my suit and tie to earn his respect. Where's the balance there? Yeah.
I think you got two things that are in play. I think number one is we've never really gotten away from a temple mentality. So you talk about the sanctuary being a reverent place for a lot of places. Again, I mentioned this probably last week where I remember going into small churches and you would see a sign that said enter in reverence, enter in silence or whatever, because hey, you get into the sanctuary, it's a big deal, right? Tell your kids don't run in God's house, those types of things. Well, you got to think about that because we're viewing the sanctuary as the Holy of Holies. So, you got the outer court, which the Gentiles could come to, but then once you get into the inner court and the Holy of Holies, man, the farther you got in, the more holy it got, and the fewer people could go in there.
Yeah.
Well, we still have this temple mentality that we come to the church building to see God, to offer our sacrifices to God. And so that drives our view of the sanctuary. It should be this. You should act this way. We should look this way. When Jesus clearly said, I don't dwell in temples made with hands anymore. Man, I dwell in you. I dwell in the hearts of my people. Now, that doesn't mean, and it's just, to me, it's just practical sense that we just deface or defame our sanctuary.
Right.
We don't run around and act, because even now in our services, when I see kids doing that, I'm always very mindful of what's happening on the stage, who's up there, what's going on. I don't ever want a child to feel like, man, there's a place in our church that they can't have access to. But at the same time, some pretty important things happen in this area. And so let's just have a view of respect. I really don't even want to use the word reverence because, man, we don't worship stages and we don't worship those types of things. But there's a level of respect that a child doesn't know.
Right.
That we have the responsibility to help them understand.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of that respect issue, right? And then I think that even bleeds over into the name of God. So when we pray with our children, okay, this would be a great thing for young parents to do.
Yeah.
Man, when you pray with your kids, start teaching them how to be reverent with the name of God. So if you're, because you're the content. Some people might say, well, if I'm praying with my child, I really want them to understand that he's our dad and he's our buddy and all this, well, you can get that in the content of your prayer. Right? I don't have to I don't want to use the word dumb down, but I don't have to simplify the name of God to express how I feel about him relationally.
Yeah.
So even with your little children, God our Father, is a great way to refer to, to God when we pray to him. I mean, hallowed be thy name. So if we're going to pray as Jesus told us to, then it's not us repeating the Lord's Prayer. That was a model. So I think there's something in there that we have to continue to teach and revere, God's name because of what he's done for us.
Yeah.
And there's no one equal to him.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And so why would we address him as we would anybody else?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good illustration, kind of comparing it to temple mentality and the Holy of Holies. Because I've always thought of, as a worship leader, if we're called to worship with our lives, if worship is not just on Sunday, then why do we have to act different, look different, dress different on a Sunday just because we're coming to a building to do it with other people?
Right.
So if I'm worshiping, and same thing with, now again, we're getting into cultural things here, so I'm probably going to, hopefully I don't ruffle feathers, but even taking our hat off to pray. Like if we are commanded in Scripture to pray continually, then we should never wear a hat. Like there's no reason to ever wear a hat if we can't pray with a hat on.
Yeah.
And so if we are to pray continually with our lives and I can't pray with a hat, then we can't wear a hat anymore. Yeah. So and this is the millennial in me of questioning things, but and I do think, again, there's respect to be had, and there's, when you're talking about a corporate context, you don't want to create distractions. And then we've talked about stumbling blocks and those kind of things as well. So all this is part of the conversation, but I think relating it to that temple mentality, Holy of Holies, and carrying that over makes perfect sense, because that's probably in a lot of ways what we're doing.
Well, and take the hat issue, for example. It's not an issue of reverence. It's an issue of respect.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you remove your hat when we play the Star Spangled Banner? Gentlemen, remove your hats as we play the Star Spangled Banner. Why is it that when I go to, not that I do this much, but a couple times I have, an old school, really nice golf club, there's a sign on the door that says, please remove your hat before entering the building.
Ruth Chris, they made me.
Ruth Chris, yeah. I mean, so this is it's a golf club. Yeah. Like people play golf out here. But when you walk into that building, they're just saying, have some respect.
Right.
Like respect the people who've walked before you. It's the same thing with the Star Spangled Banner to me, man. You're respecting the people that have fought and died for our country.
Yeah.
Right. So when I walk into a church building, man, do I see this? Do I see and feel the same context of saying, man, this is not a law. It's a cultural norm for us. But man, when I'm addressing God, when I'm addressing God, do I have enough respect?
Yeah.
To just it's and I think that's where we get twisted up with, well, show me where that says that in the Bible. Well, I mean, I could go to Jesus' prayer, hallowed be thy name, and say, here's where he demonstrated that.
Yeah.
What's that got to do with me taking my hat on or not? Well, man, if you're that uptight about your hat, you got a bigger issue.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, whatever it could be. So I think I'm like you. I think you got to be careful with that. But at the same time, like I don't want, and this may be old guy in me, but I don't want an old school golf country club. Didn't have to be old school. Dude, you go to Hilton Head and go into Plantation Club where the Ocean Course and Heron Bay is.
Yeah.
And even the clubhouse at Harbortown.
Yeah.
Signs on the door. Please remove your hats before you walk into the building. Okay. I don't want a golf course clubhouse to demand more respect than we do when we come together to worship a holy God. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So again, it's not about any of those things. It's just about, man, how are we, and I think this is another good way to think about it. How are we getting back to language, demonstrating to a lost and dying world how we view our God?
Yeah.
What level of respect do we have? Because we've lost that, guys. I mean, unbelievably lost that, like in our school systems. We talked last week about me taking a letter home from Miss Souter in my 5th grade class. And now, Alec and Madison, both in the school systems, we've got tons of teachers in our church and administrators. They know this, but my kids are just discovering it. Like, you don't have any recourse with kids now. I mean, it's crazy what they get away with, what they can do. And man, there's really not a lot you can do about that.
Right.
Challenging the authority of a teacher every single day.
Yeah.
So I think it is a cultural issue, but with something like this, obviously, and God was using all of these commandments to point to something that was coming.
Right.
Because if you don't revere my name, then how are you going to feel about Jesus when I send my image? If you don't revere my name, then how are you going to feel about my son?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if he's the image of the invisible God, and it's at his name that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So what was God doing all of these years throughout history? Man, teaching us how important the name is.
Yeah.
The name is, so that when Jesus came and we were challenged to do what? Bow our knee and claim him Lord.
Yeah.
Romans 10:9-10. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved.
Yeah.
So what is our eternal salvation based on? how we view the name.
Yeah.
And if we've not trained ourselves on revering the name, we're not going to bow our knee to his name.
Yeah. You know, I think it's easy in a conversation like this with reverence and respect and all of this that we're talking about. It's easy to make it a generational thing, and that, well, an older generation has, you know, they view it differently than we do, and times have changed and all this. One of the most convicting things that I've been thinking through as we've been having this conversation, you mentioned when we sing the national anthem or whatever it may be. Last week when we were talking about idols and symbols in our life group, I brought up the American flag and the symbol that the American flag represents for our country. And I just asked our group, how would you feel if someone dropped an American flag to the ground?
Oh, they'd lose their mind.
Lose their mind.
Yes.
We have so much respect for an American flag because, and should, like, for what it represents for our country and for the people who have sacrificed so much to give us the freedom that we have and are sacrificing now. And we should have respect for that symbol because of what it represents. But at the same time, it would kill us to see that.
Yeah.
And it kills us when there's these things going on in the world. We see a flag on fire or a thing, like, just absolutely eats us up inside. But then we throw around these words and throw around God's name like it's just another word.
Absolutely.
And so it's more than just a generational thing. I think in a lot of ways we've just got our priorities out of order.
Absolutely.
You also brought up, with Jesus coming into the picture. Last week we talked about, and we know this, Jesus came to fulfill the law. So if Jesus came to fulfill the law, obviously this is part of the law, the 10 Commandments. So what does that mean for this commandment? Yeah. What does it mean that if Jesus came to fulfill the law, does that mean we don't have to obey this commandment anymore? Yeah. Like we can now, we've got Jesus' name, so we can use that instead of Yahweh. What does it mean that Jesus fulfilled the law in a commandment like this?
Yeah, I think there's always a good, healthy tension between our responsibility to the Old Testament as believers in Jesus and not. So we were never put under the Mosaic law. That was a covenant made with the Jewish people at that time. That they were under the Mosaic law. Yep. We're under the new covenant. So under the new covenant, instead of having 632 laws, we have 2 commandments. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbors yourself. Now, Jesus would go on to say, all of the law and all of the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. So the key to fulfilling, and what's interesting is in Romans it says that Jesus Christ died so that the law could be fulfilled in us, which is such a cool. I'm telling you, man, we've been doing Romans 1-8 on Wednesday nights.
Yeah,
dude, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, not because that's not me. I'm just like the content. And on Wednesday nights, when you're just walking through verses and you don't really kind of feel the pressure to preach a message like you do on Sunday mornings,
right?
It's just so different. And these things kind of strike you and you go, man, I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah. And Romans is thick.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why you got to take it chunks at a time. Mm-hmm. But thinking about Jesus fulfilled the law so that the law could be fulfilled in you. Mm-hmm. So God never relinquished your responsibility to fulfill the law. He fulfilled the law in you through Jesus. So isn't that cool that, like, the responsibility is still there?
Yeah.
But it was done in us through Christ. So you didn't fulfill the law.
Right.
I don't fulfill the law, but Christ fulfilled the law for me, and now he is fulfilling that in me. Yeah, it's a crazy concept.
Yeah, because I've always heard that Jesus came to fulfill the law. So Jesus fulfilled the law. Right. I don't think I've ever heard it kind of pointed back at us that he fulfills the law through us. What does it mean that he does it through us?
Well, I think that when God looks at you, because we say this, God looks at you, he sees Jesus.
Yeah,
right?
Right.
Okay. Who was Jesus? The one. So if God established the law as his ultimate righteous standard, when God sees Jesus in you, he sees Cameron as somebody who has fulfilled his righteous standard.
Because of Jesus.
Because of Jesus.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So when he sees Jesus in us, what does he see?
I see, yeah.
He sees the one who fulfilled the law. Yeah. So the requirement of the law has been fulfilled in us. But Jesus is the one who fulfilled the law.
Yeah.
Well, he is in us.
Yeah.
So the Father sees us. In us, the law has been fulfilled.
Wow.
Isn't that it's that's why Romans is so mind-blowing, man. Yeah. You can't just zip through it. But to this context, I think that Jesus fulfills because he came as the name of God. He is God. You know, that's one of the biggest things about his divinity is that he didn't become God. He is God.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that, you know, he came and made relationally what we only knew in written form.
Mm-hmm.
So now and think about this from the context of a Jew. They couldn't even say the name of God. And Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Well, how did they handle his name if they believed that?
Yeah.
But it was at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that he is Lord. So I think when you look at the pattern, and this is in my mind, God was using, because all the law points to something. He's using this commandment 3 to point people to, like we were to reverence the name, and then we got to know the name in relationship.
Yeah.
So that reverence is still there because he is God in the flesh.
Yeah.
So now this thing that we couldn't even write the name down because it would possibly be defamed or even speak it, now he's speaking to us. Mm. He's living with us. He's showing us who he is, and now we confess his name.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it was just, again, everything points to what God was about to do in Christ.
Yeah. So then what is again, even with Jesus fulfilling the law, we can look back to Old Testament laws as kind of guidelines for us still. So what is this commandment? What is this context, this conversation that we're having? What does it mean for us today? Mm-hmm. Jesus fulfilled the law. What do we do with that? What do we do with not taking the Lord's name in vain today?
To me, I think it's all about revering the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
Because here's what you find, and all you all know this. We hear it. We talk about it. In any context, you can talk about religion in this world. Mm. You can talk about a lot of gods and prophets in this world, but you start talking about Jesus, and everybody flips. Mm. Everybody flips. Why? I mean, you talk about God. Okay. Talk about other religions and their leaders. Not a problem. But you start talking about Jesus, and everybody shuts down. Mm. And the reason why is because he is the image of the invisible God. Mm-hmm. Nobody else has claimed that. They've claimed to be gods, but not Yahweh, mm-hmm. because there are no other gods.
Yep.
So the world knows more than they're putting on. Now, if we don't believe that, why in the world in secular courts do we swear to God on a Bible mm-hmm. before we stand up there to tell the truth?
Yeah.
Now think about that, man. Think about what the court system is trusting.
Yep.
All right. You could be the murderer. You could be the rapist. You could be the thief. You could be the whatever. Okay, put your hand on this Bible because we feel like there's enough fear of God in you that you're going to tell the truth.
Wow.
Really? Like you just killed somebody.
Yeah.
But yet put your hand on that Bible, all of a sudden you're going to tell the truth because you fear what it represents. Mm. So there's still this view that swearing on a Bible is going to make you do something, going to make you do the right thing. So it's amazing how even the world still, a part of our world sees that. But I think what it means for us today is now that we've moved from a God that we couldn't see to a God that we can see, mm-hmm. right? Not a different God, same God, but now we've seen him. He is the image of the invisible God. Man, what should our reverence be like now that he has loved us enough to move from us not just hearing him, but seeing him?
Yeah.
Knowing that he existed. Like our God existed historically in our world. Mm. Nobody can argue with that. I mean, they can argue if he's God or not, but mm-hmm. but there's no question that Jesus existed historically.
Yeah.
There's enough secular proof that a man named Jesus, existed.
Yep.
Even secular proof to say that that some saw him walking after his death. Mm-hmm. That's all documented. So again, it comes back to us as believers. I do think, Cameron, that yes, man, should we not use the Lord name in a worthless and careless manner? Of course not. But I think it goes even deeper in that for us because I think we do much more damage when we don't live out our faith.
Yeah.
When we take oaths and make commitments that we don't intend to keep.
Yeah.
A couple who stands before God and is married, They've made a covenant, man. They've taken an oath, and they've done it before God. And every time a couple like that gets divorced, they've taken the Lord's name in vain.
Yeah.
Think about that. You know, so that's an extreme measure. But what about when we commit to do something? We don't do it. You know, I was heavy on this with our 4G2C campaign. You know, I remember preaching one Sunday in that series. Look, I'm telling you, do not make an oath with God that you're going to give something and don't do it. Just don't make the oath. Like, it's much, much better for us. Solomon wrote this in Ecclesiastes. Much better to not make an oath than to make an oath and not keep it. Because that is a shav, that's that word vain, a false oath. And God says, when you do that, you're taking my name in vain.
Yeah.
Because you're committing to do something in my name and you don't fulfill it.
Yeah.
So he said, better off not to do that. Just don't even make the commitment.
Right.
So I think it's that. I think it's us as Christians. My junior high and high school football coach would say this to us all the time. Remember the name on the back of the jersey.
Yeah.
You know, now, yeah, I think in high school we had our own names, but a lot of times it was just a school name.
Yeah.
It's who you represent.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of a biblical concept. We've got to go out into a lost and dying world and bear the image of Christ. So when we're choosing to bear our own image and not the image of Christ, we're taking the Lord's name in vain.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm not saying we're perfect and we have to be perfect,
Right.
but it has everything to do with, man, my speech and my conduct and you know, the fruit that I'm bearing, all those types of things. You know, that's what it means for us. Because Jesus addressed this in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5. You know, you say that, you know, you should do this or this about false oaths. I'm saying don't swear at all. Be such a person of integrity that your yes is yes and your no is no.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't have to go, I swear, you know, because that's what we did as kids.
Yeah.
Man, I swear this is true. You know, we would invoke God's name in that. And he would say, don't, just be a person of integrity. Let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, it doesn't negate, you know, not taking the Lord's name in vain. And, you know, that the first part of that conversation of the two phrase word with, you know, and what that means, we still shouldn't do those things. And it still applies to that. But even bigger, it applies to the way that we live our lives. Because if we're calling ourselves, I love that idea that it's not just the way it shouldn't. This commandment shouldn't just impact the way that we talk; it should impact the way that we live.
Absolutely.
Because if we're saying that we're followers of Jesus and not living that out, that's taking the Lord's name in vain.
Yep.
Like our lives are now taking the Lord's name
Yep.
in vain and not living out the way that He's called us to live. So yeah, I think that's a great distinction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff. Y'all have anything else? We've got
Hang on.
Yeah.
I got a different little schedule coming up.
Yeah. We've got mission trips leaving. This will come out on Wednesday. So Thursday, our Middle East team is leaving for the following week. Friday, our New England high school team is leaving.
Old England.
And then Old England.
You said
I said that last week.
You
too.
said New England.
It's because we're going to New York.
Yeah,
We're
that's
New
right.
York and Old England.
Yep.
So yeah, England team, high school team's leaving on Friday, and then New York team's leaving Sunday. So
Nice. Speaking of Old England,
yeah,
you know what I discovered, and this is so silly. Everybody knows this, except for me, I guess, until I got there. Is I never put together, like, there's a York, England,
yeah,
and then we have a New York.
yeah,
Because when all those were settled by people who came from, you know, England. So, like Birmingham, Alabama, of all places.
yeah.
Birmingham is where we do a lot of mission work in England.
Birmingham.
Yeah, not Birmingham.
Yeah.
It's Birmingham, right? It's so neat to me that, like, you can go over there and you see the old, we have the new whatever,
Right.
that was the old whatever over there.
And New England is that section of the United States, right?
Yeah, the New England was that section, those first colonies that
New York
were
is in-
settled,
Yeah.
you know, bases the old England.
Interesting.
So interesting, man.
There you go.
It's such a great trip. Have you ever been? You've been to England, haven't you?
I haven't. Man. No.
Well, don't get over there and do like I did and say, well, in the United States of America, and they go, yeah, you're less than 300 years old. We're thousands of years old. So what you got? I'm like, oh, yeah, right, man, my bad.
I think of Ron Swanson with the, I hope no one in England's listening to this, but Ron Swanson, oh, look, a clock. We don't have that in America.
Yeah.
Talking about Big Ben.
Oh my word.
Yeah, it's amazing to get outside of our country and you really realize how young this country is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of that, about 30 days, well, a little more than 30 days until the big election.
Yep.
Right? So man, I just encourage everybody to exercise your right to vote.
Yeah.
It's something that God allows us to do in a free country,
Yeah.
and do that.
Register now for sure.
Yeah, because it matters.
Yeah, it
You know,
does.
I believe in a sovereign God, and I know what the Bible says about God putting people in places but He still has given me the opportunity to be a part of that.
Yeah.
So we should be a part of that without
Yep.
question.
So be a part of that. Be praying for our country.
Absolutely.
As we go through this, be praying for our teams as they leave this week, and we'll continue in the 10 Commandments next week.
So we got the Sabbath. Remember
Yep.
the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
There it is.
Don't be mowing that yard on Sunday.
So, yep.
Any zinger? No zingers today.
Didn't even get to throw any.
Well, you know why, don't you? She's like, I only got 8 left. I can't be wasting them. Like I
already
can't
had
be
your two.
pulling them out.
Yeah.
You could have had 10, but
You know what I was sitting here thinking about this box was my husband would throw it away immediately.
just because it's been opened.
It could be contaminated.
Well, yeah,
This
but
has
you
been
got like
tampered with to take him out.
true.
No one's safe.
But it came from your pasture. Number one. Number two.
Like I said, this
Yeah,
has been
yeah. Number two, it's zingers. Like if you're not going to eat them, give them back to me. I
yeah, I'm
will
going to
eat
eat
them.
them.
Maybe you can leave it up here. That way Joey doesn't know. Yeah, nice.
That's awesome. Sounds
All
good. Well,
right.
thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.